Hello again, everyone, and thank you for joining today's webinar on digital marketing for Chinese tourism in the COVID-19 era. COVID-19 has obviously had a very transformative effect on tourism, marketing, consumption, and lifestyles all around the world, and we're going to look today at what that means specifically for digital marketing and technology for Chinese tourism. First up on today's agenda will be social media, looking at some of the most successful strategies and overseas tourism brands accounts on WeChat and Weibo since the start of the crisis back in January and through today. Then we'll look at what I think is the biggest change in tourism marketing in China to emerge from the coronavirus crisis so far, and that is live streaming. We'll also take a quick look at specifically how museums and cultural attractions have engaged with the Chinese audience during this time, as well as some developments and how technology is used for tourism management in China now, which could be helpful for countries outside of China that are now trying to rebuild their tourism and hospitality sectors. In addition to B2C developments, I'd also like to go over how travel brands and events are using digital solutions to facilitate B2B tourism sales and marketing at this time. At the end of the webinar, I'm happy to answer any questions that you have. You can ask these at any point by using the Q&A button on your Zoom control panel, and I'll reply to those at the end. Please do use the Q&A button to ask questions rather than the chat, as it ensures that I can see the questions and make sure that they're answered at the end. We will be sending out a copy of today's PowerPoint slides, as well as a link to a recording of the webinar by tomorrow. So you'll have all of those materials to refer back to and share with any colleagues that you think might be interested in seeing them too. Before we get started, I'd like to introduce myself and Dragon Trail Interactive. My name is Sienna Perulis-Cook, and I'm Dragon Trail's Associate Director of Communications based in our London office. For more than 3 years now, I've been writing articles and reports for Dragon Trail on trends in Chinese tourism, developments in the Chinese digital landscape, and case studies of tourism brands that have stood out for attracting the Chinese market. I run our monthly webinar series, speak at industry events, which these days, of course, are all online, and I'm the co-author of the 2019 edition of China, the Future of Travel, which is an essential guide to the China outbound tourism industry, and it's available for free upon request at chinafutureoftravel.com. For those of you who don't know us, Dragon Trail Interactive is a digital marketing and solutions agency that's focused on outbound tourism from China. We help clients all around the world to reach Chinese consumers and the Chinese travel trade through innovative digital initiatives. The company is now 11 years old. It's headquartered in Beijing with offices in Shanghai, Xi'an, the US, and the UK. Our work includes social media and influencer marketing, website development, video production, travel agent training, and online events. We work with clients on 6 continents and in a wide range of industry verticals, including tourism boards, hotels, airlines, and attractions. You can find case studies of our work and more details on all of our services on our website, dragontrail.com. Before I get started with today's webinar content, I wanted to say a quick word about last month's webinar, as that was the first in our 2-part series on digital tools for Chinese tourism, with today's webinar being the second half. Our May 20th webinar was an entry-level introduction to the basics of Chinese digital platforms and tools as they relate to travel and the tourism industry. If you missed that session and would like to get more of a basic overview of Chinese online platforms, such as social media, OTAs, and travel review websites, you can watch the recording on the Dragon Trail website or on our YouTube channel. And please do feel free to email us directly if you want the presentation slides. So today we'll be building on that basic knowledge and seeing how things have developed since China and then the world were shaken by the COVID-19 crisis, starting in late January of this year. We'll start with social media, looking at tourism brands' performance on China's leading social media platforms, WeChat and Weibo. Dragon Trail has been tracking international travel brands' performance on WeChat since 2017 and on Weibo since last year. So this gives us unique insights into which destinations and companies are generating the most attention and engagement, and which strategies are working the best. In terms of communications during this pandemic, there are a number of approaches, and many travel brands have combined several of these, adapting their messaging over time. Some of the types of content that are especially popular include providing useful information, maintaining a connection with Chinese followers, providing support, moral, material, or both, letting Chinese travelers know what safety precautions are being taken by your company or in your destination, providing engaging entertainment to housebound Chinese consumers, and finding ways to adapt your marketing message to connect to what people are talking about under these new and changing circumstances. The first of many examples of the last point that I brought up is this prize giveaway from Visit Korea on Weibo. So giveaways are always popular on Weibo, especially when you have something related to Korean celebrities like this prize bundle did. But they also made it even more current and appealing by throwing in a high-end Korean face mask at a time when medical masks are a particularly coveted product. So now I'd like to share a number of other best practice examples to show how tourism brands combined those tips from the last slide for their own successful COVID-era marketing. The first is the Tourism Authority of Thailand, which has really stood out on both WeChat and Weibo. They adapted their strategy almost instantly in response to the outbreak and travel restrictions from China, and it's brought them a lot of attention and goodwill. The Chinese market is crucial to Thailand's tourism economy and probably the first major market that will return to Thailand, so we can understand why this is so important for them. Back in January and February, the messaging from the Tourism Authority of Thailand was very supportive. The tourism board made a touching video expressing solidarity with China and immediately donated medical supplies. This helped to affirm the strong relationship between the two countries and generate positive sentiment. Then more recently, Thailand has been preparing to open first to domestic tourism. And so in connection with this, they're posting very regular updates on Chinese social media, especially about the new Safety and Health Administration, which is setting requirements for hotels, restaurants, shops, attractions, and other tourism-related businesses. This should give Chinese consumers confidence for when Thailand does then reopen to overseas visitors in the coming months. Another national tourism board that stands out is Switzerland. Rather than totally shifting their strategy, they've chosen instead to stay normal, in the words of their director for China, Simon Bossart. Instead of putting marketing on hold, Switzerland has kept a strong connection to both Chinese travelers and the Chinese travel trade during this time. This has included a lot of beautiful photos of nature, which you can see here, and this is appropriate as the Chinese market is showing an even greater appetite than ever for getting into nature and away from crowded destinations. They also adapted their global Dream Now, Travel Later slogan and campaign for the Chinese market, which has had a good response. We've seen that social media content relating to film and TV is doing particularly well this year, as Chinese travelers have a lot of time stuck at home to be watching things. And Switzerland Tourism's post on a Korean drama which is set in Switzerland. Those posts have been extraordinarily popular on both WeChat and Weibo. While Japan rivals Thailand to be the #1 foreign destination for Chinese tourism, Visit Japan, the National Tourism Board, their social media content hasn't done too much actually to address or adapt to the coronavirus situation, save for a few updates on travel restrictions. They've also really kept things normal. But on the other hand, regional Japanese tourism boards have attracted a lot of attention and goodwill for content that is adapted to the current situation. Gunma Prefecture was one that organized donations to China of face masks and a kind of electronic thermometer that was actually invented in Gunma, according to the Tourism Board's video, which you can see on the left there. The man is explaining that this thermometer was invented in Gunma Prefecture. One of the hashtags on that post, which was shared on Weibo, says, "Because we are one family." And it's been interesting to see the friendship and solidarity promoted by Japan at this time, when historically there has been a lot of tension and mistrust of Japan in China, even as it became the leading outbound tourism destination. So in this sense, the virus could even be a positive turning point for the two countries' relationship. Later on, as the situation became less critical in China, we could see tourism boards like Nagasaki, which you can see on the right, embrace the concept of online cloud tourism and engage Chinese social media followers through giveaways with requirements that would help the tourism board grow their audience so that they're well positioned when international travel starts up again. So this means leaving a comment, following the account, and making sure that you repost the post about the contest, which all gives kind of more engagement and visibility to that tourism board's account. Another top municipal tourism board, very far away from Japan, is Edinburgh. They've had a mixed strategy that's produced really good results on both Weibo and WeChat by mixing topical content with the tried and true type of posts that have made them one of Europe's leading DMOs on Chinese social media. They encouraged followers to vote for Dr. Zhong Nanshan for an Edinburgh Award. The pulmonologist, who you may have heard of, was the first doctor to identify SARS, and he's been a trusted expert voice throughout the COVID-19 epidemic. He also studied at the University of Edinburgh between 1979 and 1981. He ended up winning the Being Edinburgh Award with over 90% of the vote, so we can imagine that some of these calls to action on Chinese social media may have contributed to that. They've also updated followers on what safety precautions were taken in Edinburgh during the lockdown period, and also what local businesses have done to help. But there has been plenty of non-coronavirus related content too. Edinburgh's WeChat account especially has a very strong following of current and former students who really like to reminisce and share their memories of Edinburgh. So posts like the one that you can see here on the right, which features followers' photos and comments, are always extremely popular. Museums and attractions have generally all seen lower reading rates and lower engagement rates on Chinese social media during this pandemic period. Part of the reason is that nobody is obviously visiting any of these museums at this time, and most of the museums have continued to post just totally standard content, or else cut down on content entirely or severely. But there have been some exceptions, and one museum that's kept things current while still promoting their own art collections is the V&A in London. So looking at the two posts here, they posted about Animal Crossing wallpapers when the game was really popular in China. And then they also launched a makeup and styling challenge during the lockdown period that attracted some great user-generated content. Moving on to airlines. Airlines have had a really tough time on social media over the last several months in China as well as the rest of the world, I would imagine. They have seen higher than average engagement, but that is due in no small part to thousands of queries and complaints over canceled flights and refunds. Amidst all of this, some airlines have managed to attract positive attention and feedback, and donations have been really key to this. Qatar Airways and Singapore Airways both flew in large quantities of medical supplies donated by their respective governments, and this made a very positive impression. Singapore Airlines has also, like many airlines, been very good about keeping customers informed, and they even developed a section of their WeChat mini program specifically for queries related to flights because of virus prevention related restrictions. In April, I ran a whole webinar on hotels during COVID-19 and also published an article specifically on hotel social media responses to the virus in China. So I won't go into too much detail here, as you can check those resources on our website. But basically, international hotels have been really innovative and handled this difficult period well, especially on WeChat. Many immediately published clear information on cancellation policies. They mobilized to support medical workers in Wuhan and communicate supportive messages to the Chinese audience. They then kept followers engaged and won new followers through cooking and fitness classes. They promoted services like food delivery to local area residents, and they provided extensive information on hygiene precautions at their properties. This all may have had a positive impact on the recovery of the hotel sector in China that we can see here now, where occupancy rates have really risen very dramatically to around 50% compared to the single digits where they were at the end of January and early February. During the crisis, there has been a lot of talk in the tourism industry about how we need to work together to get through this difficult time. And one example of this is Dragon Trail's Thinking of You campaign on Weibo, which we coordinated for 18 of our clients all around the world. This campaign used a unified hashtag to amplify the message and encourage more interaction and user-generated content, as destinations, hotels, and other businesses connected with followers using fun, engaging, and heartfelt content. If you want to read more about that campaign and details about the participants, there is an article published on our website on the blog section. In May, the hashtag that we used got 3 million views, and we're just about to launch a second part of the campaign now, which is aimed specifically at attracting more user-generated content. So these have all been temporary adjustments to special circumstances. But what is likely to fundamentally change for tourism marketing in China as a result of the coronavirus is the prevalence of live streaming. So first, a bit of background information on live streaming in China, because live streaming is definitely not a new phenomenon, but what is new is how it's become relevant for travel. Live streaming is incredibly popular in China, and it has been for years. It's really big for e-commerce and very important, particularly for things like cosmetics. There's also a big phenomenon of Chinese people rising to fame by live streaming their daily lives in rural areas. Their fans can then send them virtual gifts that translate into an actual income, and this has given a lot of people an entirely new way to make a living. In both entertainment and e-commerce, live streaming is very much driven by engaging personalities who become celebrities for their screen presence. Live streaming and vlogging for tourism had been growing slowly before the COVID-19 crisis, but the virus seems to have been a watershed moment for this medium. First off, all of China's top OTAs have suddenly started live streaming and making lots of money off of this. C-Trip chairman James Liang has now become sort of a live streaming celebrity in his own right, dressing up in different costumes, such as traditional Chinese theater performance costumes, or a cowboy, for instance, to sell hundreds of thousands of domestic hotel rooms in a weekly live streaming session. That's held on Wednesday evenings in China, and you can watch it through C-Trip's WeChat mini program or on their Douyin account. Likewise, the CEO of Qunar, which is the second biggest OTA in China, is also hosting live streams. And online travel marketplace Fliggy has seen a surge in businesses and influencers live streaming through their platform. So this is really a never before seen phenomenon for China's online travel market. And it is making a lot of money and starting to regenerate the tourism industry in China. And it's not just the OTAs either. One of the ways that hotels generated so much attention on social media during the crisis was through live streaming sessions, such as Marriott's cooking classes, which also included opportunities to win vouchers to the hotel and to buy discounted vouchers if you did that during the time that the live streaming was going on. Other major hotel groups like Shangri-La and IHG also got into live streaming in China with fitness classes and even parties with DJ sets. Other travel businesses also started doing live streaming during this time. So for example, the chairman of Spring Airlines managed to bring in 8 million renminbi, which is over $1 million US, from just one live streaming session in late April. Another example of a live streaming session that is a bit different from some of the others I've seen, you can see an image of that here. It was posted just last week on Weibo's live streaming platform called Edinburgh, which is integrated into Weibo. And it's a live streaming session that was posted by the New Zealand Tourism Board. And it is an hour of penguins at the zoo. And this live streaming, it doesn't have any commentary. It really doesn't even have a lot of action. It's mostly kind of penguins walking and sitting around. But it received a lot of attention. There was a lot of interaction with it, and it was something that users found very entertaining. So even a live streaming session as basic as this can get a lot of attention on Chinese social media these days. Chinese travel website Mafengwa launched a live streaming platform of their own in March, and this saw a 108% growth in April. The broadcasts include overseas destinations as well as domestic ones, and the quality ranges wildly depending on the live stream. So at the top end, you have a professional bilingual guide working with a cameraman, or a camera crew rather, for the German National Tourism Board. You can see an image of that here, the woman in white who is a native Chinese speaker but also speaks fluent German. There are also tour guides and influencers who are living in or stranded in Europe who are now giving quite decent and well-informed broadcasts, and these people have quite engaging personalities and good camera presence as well. But having watched a lot of the live streams that are available on Mafengwa, I found that there's also a girl who sits in her living room in Dubai and talks about living in Dubai, but she never actually leaves her living room. She just sometimes, but not always, shows you pictures of Dubai on her iPod. I also watched a quite shaky broadcast that was made by a couple of Chinese people walking around a park in Belgrade. So while not all of these live streams are very good, there is something to be said for the authenticity of some of the more amateur ones, which is actually one of the appeals of live streaming as a medium. And we might also expect that if some of these live streams, even if they're quite basic, if they start to build up an audience now, then later on when it is possible to go out and do things on the live stream, that live streamer will have already built up an audience that can help them to grow and make a name for themselves. So the big question is, why is the COVID-19 pandemic the tipping point for Chinese travel live streaming? On one hand, I would say that it was probably going to happen anyway, given how important and popular live streaming has become as a form of media in China, especially for selling things. Chinese consumers are really used to a live streaming format now for e-commerce and getting to see new places and different lifestyles, and so it was only a matter of time before it took off for travel. When Chinese consumers are spending more time looking at their phones at home and aren't so mobile like right now, it is finally the right time for this. When it comes to e-commerce, Chinese consumers like live streaming because it helps them to get to learn about a product more thoroughly and trust it before they buy it. So now, at a time when travelers need more assurances than ever about the quality of travel products like hotel rooms, for example, live streaming, especially if it's hosted by a figure of authority such as the CEO or the chairman of a company, that can give them some of that trust. Another reason that live streaming was on its way anyway, but has picked up for travel now, is age. Live streaming is particularly popular with younger Chinese. So for example, more than 50% of Mafengwa's live streaming audience was born between 1985 and 1995. And another 20% is even younger than that. These younger Chinese are those who are most likely to start traveling first as well. we saw that 56% of customers who bought travel products on Ctrip for China's May holiday, which happened just at the beginning of this May, were born in 1990 or later. And it's this 1990s generation that's also the most optimistic about when they will be able to travel again. So moving on from live streaming, cultural attractions have done a lot with technology during the COVID-19 crisis, and I'd like to take a look at this area too, which potentially has some ideas that can be applied to other tourism sectors. Chinese museums have been exploring the digital sphere for some time already. For example, free apps introducing the collections at the Palace Museum in Beijing's Forbidden City have been around since 2017. The coronavirus crisis may have pushed this all to the next level, though. For example, China's National Museum launched their new exhibition virtually since they couldn't launch it physically. You can see an image of that at the bottom of the screen here. The virtual experience is certainly not the same thing as a physical visit to a museum. You have restricted viewpoints. You can't particularly get in really close to see an object, and the navigation is slightly motion sickness inducing. But it is a worthy effort to try to deliver this content to a wider audience and to deliver it to any audience all at a time when nobody can actually visit the museum. A contemporary art museum in Beijing, M Woods, which you can see at the top of the screen here, they offered a really interesting exhibition online during the lockdown period. And this exhibition was done more like a video of a virtual museum and a virtual exhibition in that museum, where the video would take you inside the museum and then stop at certain pieces of artwork, many of which were short videos in and of themselves. So you may wonder what the value is in offering this kind of content for free. Obviously, it takes a lot of work and resources to create this kind of digital experience for people to enjoy. And I think that something like this temporary digital exhibition from M Woods actually did a great job familiarizing viewers with the kind of artwork and curation that they could expect from the museum. And then this will presumably attract physical visits in the future, now that more people know about what kind of museum it is and what they should be expecting to see there. Another thing about the value of creating these digital assets is its link to e-commerce. The Palace Museum in the Forbidden City has made huge amounts of money from merchandise sold through e-commerce channels in recent years. So expanding their online audience does drive revenue. While they were still closed in early April, the Forbidden City organized a series of live streaming tours, and these got more than 30 million views. So what have museums outside of China been doing during this time? Video tours in Chinese have been very well received. The Asian Art Museum in San Francisco published a series of short videos in Mandarin and hosted by the museum's director, and these got above average views for the account. One museum that has really stood out is Versailles. A few weeks ago, they published a video tour on Weibo. It was hosted by the museum's director, who's quite famous, but the real appeal of the video for Chinese audiences was the interpreter, who you can see here on the left. She speaks absolutely phenomenal Chinese, and visitors were incredibly impressed. All of the comments on the post that I read were about her, rather than about the director or the collections. And you can see that the video received about 1 million views. The fact that the Chateau de Versailles found somebody like this to create their video tour really sends a welcoming message to the Chinese community and has helped to bring them a huge amount of attention. We also see other museums putting more content online in Chinese, such as MoMA, and the Museum of Modern Art in New York City. This is one of the world's leading museums on both WeChat and Weibo. They don't translate their video content into Chinese, but they do offer a mini program on WeChat to introduce some of the collection highlights. And they've also translated their Tinder-style artwork dating app into Chinese, which is a really fun and interactive way to learn more about art. MoMA is just one of the number of US museums that's featured on the MTM and WeChat Go Museums in the Cloud mini program, which helps a Chinese audience learn about US museums and their collections. You can learn more about this mini program and lots of other examples of what museums in and outside of China have been doing during COVID-19 on a website called Jing Travel. This includes many articles, and they also published a very interesting and free to download report about what museums in China were doing during the crisis. As countries start to reopen, there are a number of ways that digital tools can be used to help tourism to return safely. And we can look to China to see how this is being done. There are ideas that we can adapt in other countries, not to mention that following China's lead in some of these areas can help to make Chinese tourists feel more confident and safer about visiting when Chinese outbound travel begins again. As attractions like the Forbidden City have reopened in China, they've done so at reduced capacity with required pre-booking. Making this easy to do online can ensure that visits are limited and staggered throughout the day. You can also collect contact information, and in a worst case scenario, this kind of contact information could be used for a track and trace virus prevention program. For instance, if it's discovered that somebody with the virus visited the attraction at a certain time of day, you can see who else was at the attraction at that same time and the same day. Virus aside, you can also use online booking as a way of collecting visitor data and, of course, with their permission, using this to push future sales and marketing. This certainly isn't going to take off everywhere in the world, but as you probably know, China has been operating with a system of health QR codes through WeChat and Alipay in recent months, where you need to present a green QR code in order to enter office buildings, attractions, and other places. When the QR code is green, you're free to do things normally, but a yellow or a red QR code means that you need to be quarantined. So for example, if you've just returned to the country and you haven't done the mandatory 14-day isolation yet, you will not be able to get a green QR code. Macau, which is likely to form one of the first travel bubbles with the Chinese mainland, has introduced its own health QR code system. And it will be interesting to see if any other countries or territories do something similar in the months to come. This is again something that I shared in our April webinar on what hotels can do during the crisis. But there are a number of ways that hotels can reduce direct face-to-face contact or commonly touched objects or surfaces going forward. And this will be appealing both to Chinese travelers and those from other countries as well. These include many things that were already being rolled out in China before the virus struck, such as contactless check-in kiosks, robotic room service, and WeChat mini programs that bring you concierge services and guides to the hotel's facilities and local area to your phone. In China for years, customers at many restaurants have been able to scan a QR code on their tables to open a digital menu, order through their phones, and then pay online as well. Now, as a result of the coronavirus, we're finally starting to see this kind of thing gain popularity overseas, mostly to eliminate the need for menus that are touched by customer after customer. The photos here on the left are from Pizza Hut in Beijing, where you've been able to do everything using QR codes with online ordering and payment for many years already. And then the photos on the right are from a cafe in Tel Aviv. This is a very recent development for them, where you can scan the QR code on the table, on the cafe door, or even taped to the waiter's shirt to open the menu on your phone. I've also seen similar images from Italy, so it looks like the West is becoming more like China in this respect. It will also be comfortable for Chinese tourists It allows restaurants to more easily update menus or offer multiple language options, and it reduces the waste of disposable paper menus. Around the world, there's also a move away from cash right now, with many businesses in the UK at least becoming card only and encouraging contactless card payments. This could finally be the impetus to push countries outside of China into greater adoption of mobile payments, again bringing us closer to technology that's been common in China for years and is going to be extremely familiar to Chinese tourists, most of whom would love to be able to pay with WeChat Pay or Alipay when they travel abroad. The COVID-19 crisis is already totally transforming B2B marketing and communications around the world as everything goes online. And this is absolutely relevant for the Chinese travel industry as well. Ever since ITB Berlin got canceled at the end of February, all physical trade shows in the travel industry have been either canceled or postponed. And many of these are now going online. Dragon Trail is working with two of the major shows for China using our digital trade show platform, the Next Travel Market, or TNTM, to enable their exhibitors to hold meetings with Chinese buyers, host virtual booths, share materials, and make live presentations. One of these is COTTM Online. So COTTM is one of the biggest outbound tourism exhibitions in China, and it is scheduled still to be held physically in Beijing in early September. However, they're complementing the physical show with COTTM Online, which is running all summer. On the business travel side of things, IT and CM China, they first decided to delay their March show in Shanghai, and then later on they decided to move to an online-only model this year, which will be held in August. Looking forward, they plan to offer a hybrid of online and offline shows in future years. Apart from industry exhibitions, we're also helping tourism destinations with customized roadshows online. The Lucerne Tourism Board and its partners are doing their China Roadshow online this summer using the TNTM platform. This week, the Hong Kong Tourism Board is holding a virtual show with a conference program that is broadcast over Dragon Trail's CTA live webinar platform, and this is supplemented by online matchmaking and meetings that support text and voice messages, video calls, translation, and file transfer. These online roadshows are also set up to run on both desktop and mobile and through WeChat or a web browser, so they work well both inside and outside of China. Users can pre-schedule appointments between buyers and exhibitors can give live presentations with slides and video, which are available for playback later on. Exhibitors can also share videos, photos, and other information through an online resource library available to visitors. And what makes this platform especially well adapted to the Chinese travel market is not just that we've been developing and using these tools for years already, far before the coronavirus struck, but also that we've built up an enormous database of registered Chinese travel trade professionals during this time. So these events are promoted to more than 54,000 Chinese travel agents and tour operators. If this sounds like something that could help you to run a roadshow for China online in the coming months, please do get in touch with us directly to discuss your requirements. Although international travel from China is suspended at present, this is also a particularly good opportunity to hold online training for the Chinese travel trade. They're less busy than normally, and they're very keen to enrich their knowledge as much as possible to be able to sell and organize travel as effectively as possible once outbound travel does return. So before we move on to the Q&A section, I'd like to share some additional resources to help you learn more about Chinese tourism and travel marketing. As I mentioned in our last webinar, we are launching a new self-study online training platform called China Outbound Travel Academy, or COTA, to help you learn more about the Chinese market. The first module will be on digital tools for tourism sales and marketing, and this will be available to take for free. The training will include written and video content with quizzes to test your knowledge throughout. We should have that launched probably by the end of next week, and we hope that you'll try it out. We'll be in touch by email and also share the news on our social media and website as soon as that is available. Our next webinar, coming up at the end of July, will look at recovery prospects for Chinese outbound tourism, with a guide to what destinations and other businesses can be doing on the B2B side, as well as a timeline for how to re-engage the consumer market as we look towards international travel restarting in Q3 and Q4, particularly during China's October holiday period. You'll find registration links for both of the webinar sessions on the events section of our website or directly with the link here, which will be shared with you when we send out the webinar slides tomorrow. For more regular updates, please do follow us on social media. We're active on LinkedIn, Twitter, Facebook, and WeChat, and sign up for our monthly newsletter. You can also request a free digital copy of the book, China, the Future of Travel, at chinafutureoftravel.com. So thank you all very much for your time today, and now we're going to open the floor for your questions.